Hi there. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us here today. My name is Lynn Dome, Women in Cybersecurity Executive Director. We often go by our acronym WiCyS, WiCyS is how we spell it. And we pronounce it WiCyS, like we sisters, because that's exactly what we are. We are a global cyber sisterhood. And I'm super thrilled to be joined here today with Janet. With Optum. Optum United Healthcare is a longtime strategic partner and supporter of the WiCyS organization. We're super thrilled to have Janet here today to be presenting on cybersecurity careers in healthcare. So I am going to share just a little bit about the WiCyS organization. We're a 501c3 member-based nonprofit. We have over 5,700 members comprised of women, men, allies, and advocates that all have a strong mission and passion to recruit, retain, and advance women in cybersecurity. And we do so by creating opportunities. We have many different skill development training programs. We have an online members forum where all our members can network and connect. We have newsletters and scholarships, grants, and awards, not only for our conference, which is March 16th through the 18th in Denver, Colorado, 2023, but we also have scholarship grants and awards for other conferences as well. Our Cyber Talent Emergency Fund is there for students that have financial emergencies, such as they have medical bills or their car breaks down. We don't want anything to derail students from completing their education. So students could receive up to $599 within 48 hours of applying for the Cyber Talent Emergency Fund. We have speaking and media opportunities so our members can be what others can see, and that's the cybersecurity professionals they are. Our Job Board Plus Plus is available 24/7 for strategic partners like Optum to recruit from and post their jobs in. And all our members have access to that Job Board Plus Plus, where they could update their profiles and upload their resumes. We have apprenticeship programs and internship programs and leadership summits, leadership series, leadership workshops. We have a veterans assistance program and a military spouse assistance program, and we'll soon be relaunching our speakers bureau. Right now, we have our current session of our mentor-mentee program going on, where we designed and developed resources and a curriculum to upskill and uplevel women no matter where they're at in their careers, preparing them for their next level of advancement. And additional initiatives and training programs. We have a training program that applications are open for right now. That's all on our website, WiCyS.org, WiCYS.org. And in addition to this, we have our Equity Advocacy Committee, formerly called the Racial Equity Committee, and now it's the Equity Advocacy Committee. And that's to ensure that WiCyS is leading with allyship and inclusion and equity externally, but also internally as well. So in addition to this 5,700 members, we also have, I think, 49 or 50 professional affiliates right now, and they're throughout Africa, Australia, Canada, France, India, Pakistan, the UK, and throughout the United States. And we have specialty affiliates like WiCyS Trusted AI, we have WiCyS Critical Infrastructure, WiCyS Cloud Security, WiCyS BISO. We also have our military affiliate, our LGBTQ plus Pride affiliate, and neurodiversity affiliate, and many others. And on top of that, we also have close to 170 student chapters. So there's a lot of WiCyS going on, and we'd encourage you to go to WiCyS.org and check us out. But we owe all this to our strategic partners that support us with the year-round benefits. And our Tier 1 partners are AWS, Bloomberg, Carnegie Mellon Software Engineering Institute, Cisco, Fortinet, Google, Intel, Lockheed Martin, Meta, Microsoft, Optum, who brings us the webinar here today, Sandia National Labs, and SentinelOne. And then you can see we have Tier 2 and Tier 3 partners as well. So today we're super thrilled to have Janet here, to be discussing our topic at hand, and that's cybersecurity careers in healthcare. I mean, this is a pretty hot topic in so many regards, and, very important. And of course, we encourage you to ask your questions. At the bottom of your screen, there's this chat functionality, and post your questions there. Janet's going to answer them live. And if you haven't done so already, please subscribe to the WiCyS newsletter. We roll out many different initiatives and training programs very, very quickly. And we have short windows of registration and enrollment and everything. So the best way to stay up to date with all that's happening within the WiCyS org is through the newsletter. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and stop my slides right here, and I'm going to pass the mic on over to Janet. So, Janet, take it away.
All right. Hello, everyone. Do we have my slides?
Oh, I'll go ahead and, yep, right there.
There you go. All right. Thank you. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are joining us from. As she said, my name is Janet Lippum. I'm the Senior Manager of Optum Care's Security Architecture team. Optum Care is part of Optum, as Lynn mentioned, that is part of Optum Health Group. They're best known for their health insurance product, United Healthcare. You may not be aware, though, that they also provide medical care. We have over 53,000 doctors in almost 1,500 clinics across the country, providing health care directly to over 19 million patients. So to tell you a little bit about my background so you understand who's speaking to you today, I got my first IT job in 1984. Please don't do the math. It also happened to be my first security job. I wrote ACF2 security rules on an IBM mainframe, if you know what that is. Between 1984 and 2012, I worked in a variety of roles in IT. I spent most of that time in infrastructure support as a Unix administrator. At one point, I was application support for our systems that provided phone numbers to the E911 system. I spent a few years as a project manager. And if you're not familiar with the term service delivery, basically those are the people who work as liaisons between IT and your business partners, helping them get work through the IT systems. In 2012, I had been involved in a pretty intense and extremely stressful project for a couple years. So when they decided to eliminate my job in 2012, I was really burned out. Didn't want to have anything to do with IT. So I decided to take a couple years off. I went to culinary school, earned a couple of culinary arts degrees, tried my hand at my own baking business, and even briefly worked in food service. What I found was that I missed the complexity of the problems that you solve in IT. And if you've ever worked in food service, you'll know what I mean when I say I missed my clean, dry desk job. So I decided to return to IT. I wanted to get into cybersecurity because I kept hearing about all of these data breaches and online fraud, and I wanted to protect decent, hardworking, honest people. But without specific experience in that field, it really wasn't possible to directly get a job. So I found a job as a compliance analyst with a healthcare organization. Luckily for me, the person who was handling IT security left within a couple months. And because they liked the work they had seen from me so far, I was able to transition into that job. So from 2015 until now, I've been in IT security. First, as an IT security analyst, I progressed to a team lead, a manager, and most recently to a senior manager position. That progression has been possible due to supportive managers in my line of management and also to UHG's culture of developing its talent internally. So to tell you a little bit about why I chose healthcare, to be completely transparent, it was for job security. At the time I was looking for this job, I was in my early 60s, and I had concerns about finding someone who would hire someone my age, because the need for healthcare isn't dependent on economic conditions. I felt like that would be a stable industry, and there'd be less of a chance that I'd have to look for another job during my career. As I mentioned earlier, I felt that I wanted to be in security to protect people from cyber thieves. And I realized this morning as I was going through this presentation again, that the opening I found for that compliance analyst was with my healthcare provider. And because I liked the way that they treated me as a patient, I wanted to be part of their organization. In the 7 years that I've been in cybersecurity, I've grown to appreciate the value of protecting patients' personal information. And as we go through the slides, I'll explain why that's become a target for cyber thieves and the impacts that that can have on people whose information is compromised. I want to talk about healthcare regulations. I know that that may sound dull and boring, but it's important because it helps you understand how we got into the situation where your personal and your healthcare information is where it can be attacked by cyber criminals. So Health and Human Services is the organization in the government that's responsible for providing programs and services that help improve the health of Americans. And it's actually their desire to improve healthcare that eventually led to the requirement for medical records to be in electronic form. It started in 1996 with the HIPAA privacy rule. HIPAA stands for Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act. At that point in time, there was an issue with individuals being able to maintain their health insurance when they changed employers. If they had pre-existing conditions, there was really nothing that would require their new insurance company to cover those. So HHS wanted that provision included in the law. They also wanted to give individuals more control over how their what we call protected health information, or PHI, was used by and disclosed to other individuals, groups, and organizations. In 2005, at that point in time, a lot of business functions were being computerized, and they recognized that a lot of health information was now being stored electronically, what we call ePHI, and that information also needed protections for its electronic form. So they implemented the HIPAA security rule, which is also known as high tech. There are 3 types of safeguards included in that regulation. Administrative, which is your policies and procedures requiring security. Technical measures, which are your products and your hardware and software tools that enforce your security measures. And physical security. Even though the information is stored in electronic form, you still need to protect access to the physical servers and devices where that information is stored. If you remember the crash in 2008, in 2009, Congress passed the American Investment and Recovery Act. One of the provisions of that act was meaningful use of electronic medical records, and that term, EMR, is used to refer both to an individual medical record and to the applications that store and manage those individual records. They wanted that information in electronic format so that it could be provided to the government. They could combine it, they could analyze it, and use those results to improve the quality and safety of healthcare. For organizations to continue receiving their full Medicare and Medicaid reimbursement, they had to comply by January 1st of 2014. And as an incentive, the law included a $19.2 billion allocation to help doctors and hospitals implement EMRs. Now I'm going to pause for a second and roll back time a few years. Some of you may not remember this from seeking healthcare when you were younger, but it used to be that medical records were on paper, and in some instances they may still be. You would walk into a doctor's office and you could see filing cabinets or these rolling racks full of folders that contain patient records on paper. In that form, you had to have physical access if you were going to steal someone's medical information. Not only that, but because paper is so bulky, there was really no feasible way to steal, tens or hundreds or millions of medical records. So there wasn't really a way to monetize that information. But as a result of them becoming electronic, being stored on computers, and computers being put on networks, that information is now in a place where it's potentially vulnerable to an attack from anyone, anywhere in the world that has a computer and an internet connection. And it kind of proves the old saying, no good deed goes unpunished. To give you an idea of how much personal information can be in your medical record, I've listed the fields here that it can contain, and this is on top of any medical information, your medications, your conditions, tests and results. With this amount of information in here, it is a gold mine for cybercriminals seeking ways to make money off the black market. And I will explain, I'll explain how that's true as we go on. So why do attackers choose healthcare? 2 reasons. One is to make money, and the other is to simply be disruptive. You can have nation states that are interested in disrupting, our society and our way of life. It can be as simple as some person with a grudge that simply wants to take a particular organization offline. Making money. If you think back a few years, it used to be that when you heard about data breaches, it was primarily credit card numbers that were being stolen. The downside of credit cards is that number's only valid for a limited amount of time. Once either the card holder or the issuing company recognizes that number's been compromised, the card is canceled and reissued. And with the amount of credit card fraud out there, credit card issuers have improved their fraud algorithms, so they've gotten very good at detecting it. So there's really a limited amount of time between when they get the card number and when it gets canceled that can be used to make money. As such, the value of a credit card record on the black market is around $5 a piece. Compare that to medical records. If someone were to steal my medical record, there's nobody I can call to cancel that and get it reissued. That information is built over years of seeking medical care, which makes it relatively permanent, which in turn lends itself to fraud and identity theft. The average value of a medical record on the black market is $250, around $250, and a more complete record can be worth somewhere in the neighborhood of $1,000 a piece. To give you some idea of the scope of this issue, to date, over 314 million records, patient records, have been compromised in whole or in part. If you take that and multiply it by the $250 average value of a medical record, that's 78 billion potential $78 billion potential dollars to be made on the black market. Ransomware attacks and data breaches. The first data breach was reported in 2009. Between 2009 and 2021, Over 4,000 data breaches have been reported to HHS. In 2018, the average report was 1 breach per day. In 2021, they were receiving an average of 2 data breach reports per day. And in 2020 alone, over 500 healthcare organizations were victims of ransomware. Healthcare providers are also vulnerable to disruption because they're in the business of treating patients. They aren't technologists, and they may not have robust IT departments. For this reason, they are often using outdated and unsupported software and operating systems. And even when information is available on vulnerabilities that could be easily exploited, they may not be addressed simply because the organization doesn't have resources to do it. These disruptive threats can take a few forms. Cybercriminals and nation-state actors is one source. APT stands for Advanced Persistent Threat. This is an adversary that has sophisticated skills and resources to gain access to an organization's information technology infrastructure and remain there for an extended period of time while they're carrying out their malicious operations. APT groups have been linked to China, Russia, and Vietnam, and I have personally seen evidence of attacks coming from Vietnam. CISA, the Cybersecurity Infrastructure and Security Agency, another government agency, warned of heightened risk of attacks against the U.S. by Russia as retaliation for our support of the Ukraine. Access to healthcare networks. If an individual or an organization gains access to someone's computer network, but they don't have a need for it themselves, or they don't know, they don't have a way that they want to use it, they can in turn sell that access to other cyber criminals. One bad actor gained domain administrator access to a US-based medical institution with 3,000 hosts, which is a very large organization. That access was then auctioned for somewhere between $9,000 and $20,000 US dollars. Disrupting continuity of operation. Ransomware and wiper malware are two ways that can happen. Ransomware is also a way to make money. It's disruptive in that the time that your systems are encrypted, you're not able to conduct normal operations. For wiper malware, its intent is simply to wipe out the system with no hope of recovery. Recovering from these types of attacks can take weeks, and even if you don't pay the ransom, they can still cost millions of dollars. You would like to think that even criminals, have some humanity, and that during the COVID crisis, they would be empathetic and put healthcare organizations out of bounds for attacks. And there were a couple hacking organizations that did that. But for the most part, they simply took advantage of the situation, knowing that healthcare providers would be tired, be distracted, and attacks against healthcare actually increased during the pandemic. So what's the impact of this cybercrime on healthcare? It impacts the businesses, and I'm going to give you one example of this. This was a ransomware attack against the University of Vermont Medical Center. They were one of those 500 organizations that was attacked in 2020. It disrupted their operations. For almost a month, they lost access to their electronic tools, not just the tools involved in medical care like their EMR system, but also their business systems such as payroll. It impacted their patients. For several days, the organization couldn't access their appointment schedules, so they didn't know who was going to show up. They couldn't be prepared for their appointments. Surgeries had to be rescheduled, and cancer patients who needed radiation treatments had to be sent to other facilities. there's a monetary cost. Even though they didn't pay the ransom, the estimated cost of this attack is currently at $63 million, mostly from lost revenue. And as of the time that I was preparing this presentation, they were still recuperating from that attack. Impact to their employees. They had to reassign or furlough 300 employees who couldn't work because of their attack. And because it completely destroyed their computer infrastructure, their IT staff had to work around the clock for 3 weeks to rebuild the infrastructure and restore 5,000 infected endpoints. There's also an impact to individuals whose information is part of one of these breaches. Because of the large amount of personal information in your medical record, because that information is relatively permanent, victims of these breaches can potentially be identity theft victims, and they need to monitor their credit for the rest of their lives. It also sets them up to potentially be fraud victims. One of the data elements in your medical record is your insurance information. So stolen information could be used to secure products and services, going for doctor's appointments, having surgeries even. And when the bill for that procedure or that visit comes due, the coinsurance or the copayment, it's the patient, the original account information or insurance account holder, that's going to be billed for those fraudulent charges. And these things can be, they can be fixed, but they are extremely disruptive. It creates a poor patient experience, which in turn may create a distrust of the healthcare system. If individuals feel their personal information isn't safe, best case, they'll just go find a different healthcare provider. Worst case, they may avoid seeking healthcare altogether. And I know that this is a concern for Health and Human Services. I attended a conference of theirs a couple years ago where they expressed this concern, and it's one of the reasons that they have tightened up on enforcement of the HIPAA regulations, which is also one of the reasons why there is more of a need for security in healthcare. So if, like me, you're interested in protecting people, there are ways that you can get involved in the cybersecurity field. I assume that if you're attending this WiCyS webinar, that you have some interest in cybersecurity already. I'm going to outline a few specific areas of focus within that field that you can look into depending on what your personal interests happen to be. For this, I base these next couple of slides on the 8 CISSP domains. This is certainly not all inclusive of every activity within cybersecurity, but it's a framework to give you an idea of how work may be organized. If you're not familiar with the CISSP certification, it stands for Certified Information Systems Security Professional. It's a certification offered by an organization called ISC Squared. It's intended for experienced security practitioners, managers, and executives who want to prove that they have knowledge across a wide array of security practices. So let me run through these. Security and risk management. This area includes things like security awareness programs, phishing and social engineering defense mechanisms, ransomware prevention and recovery might be included in this area. It also includes risk management, which is the assessment of services, hardware, and software being brought into the organization. You may have heard the term supply chain associated with recent data breaches. That is where a malicious actor is able to get their software into either a software product or a piece of hardware somewhere in the manufacturing or distribution process. So rather than attacking companies one by one, they can have it blasted out as those products are distributed to the company's customers. Asset security. It's hard to protect what you don't know you have. In this area, you might be collecting asset information for the company's both hardware assets and information assets, making sure that they are appropriately classified as to the sensitivity of the data that they process and store, so that appropriate protections can be applied to it. It may also include resource provisioning and lifecycle management. One of the key ways to protect yourself against attacks is to make sure that your hardware and software are kept current. Lifecycle management is how you would keep a view into that and make sure that you're staying up with current technology. Security architecture and engineering, this is what my team's involved in. You might be looking at the organization as a whole, identifying security issues, engineering security processes, procedures, policies to address those issues. You might also be involved in security design or security control design for sites or facilities. Communications and network security. These days, everything's on the network. That's why we are where we are now. So it's critical to ensure that your communication channels and networks are secured. That requires understanding secure protocols and communication methods, such as wireless networks and cellular networks. And because we're all connected and we share information with a lot of our business partners, understanding that connectivity and making sure that organizations' data is secured in that process is also a very important task. Identity and access management. One way that hackers, so I can't use the term hackers because hackers can be good guys. The correct term is attackers. One way that attackers get access to your systems is to be able to compromise credentials. So it's important to be able to wrap security around the systems that issue and maintain those credentials, that authenticate those credentials. Single sign-on and multi-factor authentication would be part of identity and access management. Making sure that your critical applications, whether they're just internal facing or external facing, are covered by some type of multi-factor authentication. Security assessment and testing. Penetration testing gets the most press, and it seems kind of sexy and glamorous, but it's certainly not the only type of testing that needs to be done, and I would argue not even the most important kind of testing. Security policies and procedures are important, but they are read and interpreted and applied by humans, which makes them subject to human error. So you need different tools and techniques to be able to look through your environment and analyze where those policies and procedures may not have been fully or correctly implemented. Another key activity is vulnerability assessment, ensuring that systems are scanned for vulnerabilities and that appropriate patching is taking place so that they are not vulnerable to attacks from the outside. Security operations. All of these tools, all of these activities need somebody to manage and monitor them. One thing that you might be involved in is security operations, or SecOps, is investigations and digital forensics. You may be a person that monitors their intrusion detection and prevention systems, looking for suspicious traffic coming in from the outside and effectively blocking it. If you're a person who likes, being up on the latest and greatest, threat intelligence may be for you. Because threats are constantly evolving, you are always needing to stay on top of those and look for the appropriate mitigations to make sure that you do not fall victim to those threats. A lot of these tools use machine learning and artificial intelligence. If you're interested in those areas, working in SecOps may give you some exposure to those technologies. And last, but definitely not least, software development security. The Department of Homeland Security estimates that 90% of security incidents are related to some type of software flaw. So whether you are developing code for your company's internal use or you're developing it to sell to third parties, ensuring that your code is developed securely is critical. You might be involved in helping an organization set up secure development processes, training developers in using those. You may do risk analysis or vulnerability identification of code yourself. You may be involved in security for open source and third-party software security. I mentioned supply chain earlier. It's very common for open source and third-party software to be included in software, and making sure that there's no malicious code or no critical vulnerabilities going out with your code when it's released. So to summarize, I think, as I said earlier, you're here because you have some interest in cybersecurity. As you can see, there are lots of ways to be involved. This is certainly not all-inclusive. These are more of the heavy-duty technical aspects of cybersecurity. There are also what we would consider non-technical opportunities, things like project management, because a lot of these, these security measures that are rolled out, they need to be, they're projects, they need to be managed. So even if you're not interested in being a heavy duty, hands-on technical person, there may be opportunities for you in cybersecurity. And I hope that I have demonstrated why it is particularly important to have robust cybersecurity in the healthcare field. Do we have questions?
I'm going to go ahead and end the slides here. All right, good. Thank you, Janet. Very informative webinar. We totally appreciate that. And so I encourage the audience to put your questions in the chat area of your screen, and so that Janet would be able to answer in live. And I do see that we have one question that came in, and I think everyone needs to know this, is how to get started. What is your recommendation, Janet? Like the cybersecurity career pathway is all over the place. And so there's lots of different ways of entering in and navigating yourself through it. But what's your recommendation based on your experience?
Well, the most common, well, let me set the stage. So where a few years back, it was more difficult to break into cybersecurity. It's almost that catch-22. You have to have experience to get experience. But as things have become more computerized, there has been a lot more demand for cybersecurity. And the last statistic that I saw said there were 1.2 million unfilled security jobs worldwide. And what this means to me, being someone in the field, is that there are opportunities for people with maybe less experience to get into the field. Some of the ways that you can do that are to take an IT job that exposes you to infrastructure or exposes you to IT operations. One job that I've heard, a couple people that wanted to get into the field, they would try to find a job in a SOC, a security operations center. You sit there and you monitor alerts coming in related to the systems, the computer systems, and you have to escalate those for someone to deal with. So it gives you exposure to the types of things that can happen within IT. If you're in IT operations, you get exposed to tools and processes that are used. you get exposed, like any exposure to the infrastructure, because if you understand the network, if you understand how systems communicate with each other, if you understand like some of the challenges related to that, that can translate into being security for that. You know, as I mentioned, my background was in system administration. To be a system administrator, you have to know about security, because whether it's, you know, setting up user IDs or giving someone access, all of the activities that you perform require you to understand something about security. So getting some sort of entry level job in IT that will get you some exposure is one way to do it. If you're very self-motivated, right, and act independently, you can do things like set up your own home network, get a Raspberry Pi, set up a Kali Linux system, and basically try to hack your own network. One thing that I've looked for, and other hiring managers I work with have looked for, is someone who's taken the initiative to go out and learn things on their own. So if you've made the effort to set up your own computer, you know, your own network, maybe bought a few more computers to put on it, so you have a variety of systems, different operating systems, a Mac, a Windows, a Linux system, and you secure those, and you like set up a firewall to protect them, and you try to hack into your network from outside. That will not only train you, but it shows people that you have the initiative to learn on your own. That if they hire you, they're not going to have to spoon feed you all that information. That you're gonna figure things out. So that's one way to get into it. Another recommendation that someone gave me: if you have some technical background and you're just trying to transition into security, there's a certification out there called Certified Ethical Hacker. You get the book. It works you through exercises. The last one I heard about, they actually had labs available for you so that you could practice. So if you get this book and you work through the exercises, not only are you learning, and it teaches you about a lot of security tools. Not only are you learning, but if you make it through and you pass the test, then you come out with a certification. And that is one, along with CISSP, that's one that's respected and valued in the industry. So those are the things that I can think of, you know, off the top of mind.
That's great, Janet. And that's what, it's that grit, that determination, the curiosity to be able to troubleshoot, go down the rabbit hole, like, and not be afraid to continue to move forward, to come up with those solutions. Like, that problem solving mindset is really critical. And that's a great way is, doing your recommendations is a way to also give them the knowledge, anyone that's interested, the knowledge and experience, so they could speak to that experience when they're, working with their employers about what their next career advancement might look like. Within the WiCyS organization, we offer many different training programs. Right now, we do have open enrollment for a specific training program, so people can check that out too. And we're going to have another one open up in about 2 or 3 weeks for enrollment. So these are all just ways to explore new ways. And even if you don't advance to the top tier and receive advanced certifications from these different training programs, you're experiencing it and gaining new experiences. So,
well, yeah, and as I said, there are opportunities. You know, you no longer have to be the senior, most experienced person to get
right.
into the field. If you have some level of expertise, if you demonstrate initiative, and you mentioned a great word like curiosity. If you're analytical and you're inquiring and you ask questions, that looks good to potential employers. Plus, it says that you have the right mindset to be in this. So there are lots of ways to contribute to security, and at this point in time, because of the workforce situation, there are opportunities at all levels of experience. And I think you're trying to, like WiCyS tries to provide opportunities for people to be introduced and get started in the career in the field And United Health Group also has some opportunities like that, say through our TDP program. So
That's great.
it's a good time if you want to get into the field.
Absolutely. So we do have a note here that I'm a nurse transitioning into cyber, currently in the SANS immersion program. That's wonderful. Thank you so much for this presentation. It's been very helpful. So that's wonderful. Like, what a great nurse transitioning into cyber, listening to an Optum and cybersecurity webinar. So it couldn't have been more of a perfect match here.
And you would be a perfect person to be in cybersecurity for healthcare, because we have found that there are things, especially when you are trying to provide security for organizations that are delivering healthcare directly to patients. It's not black and white at all. You have to understand something about the service that's being provided. You have to have empathy for the providers, for the patients, understand how security looks from their perspective, and make sure that you implement it in a way that secures the organization while still allowing your healthcare providers to focus on the patients, because that's why we're in business.
Absolutely.
So thank you for that feedback.
That's great. Someone mentions that she is just starting out her career here at Optum in the TDP program. Yeah. So she was wondering if you have any specific advice pertaining to getting started within Optum, going into more cyber roles.
Well, I in my group, we actually have a couple of TDPers in there. What do you know? What group you've been placed with? Are you going to be working with security at all?
I guess there's no quick way to receive a response for that because there might be a delay.
Ask a lot of questions. Keep your eyes open for opportunities. I believe that in the TDP program, they transition you to several different teams. Well, I think it's a year-long program, and they transition you to different teams so that you get exposure to different parts of the business. So ask a lot of questions. Keep your eyes open for opportunities that you might be interested in, and speak up and request to be involved in those, because it's a big organization. If you don't tell them what you're interested in, they won't know. So I guess that would be like the first step, is to get a sense of what you are interested in. Maybe do some cybersecurity exploration online. Look at the CISSP domains is one way to look at that. And then as you're moved around to different organizations, I would say, more important even than being in cybersecurity is paying attention to your gut and what you get involved with that really draws you in, really piques your interest, and you really want to know more about that. So pay attention to that, and then seek out opportunities where you're able to follow that instinct.
That's great. Yes, for sure. Always speak up and let people know about your career goals, and so that they could champion you as you're looking to navigate through into cybersecurity yourself. So, all right.
Be your allies.
Yes, absolutely. Lean into those allies. So my previous experience is in clinical research, and I am looking forward to getting into cybersecurity with the focus of healthcare industry. I recently completed a diploma of cybersecurity at Lighthouse Lab, and am struggling to find a job. Do you have any recommendations? Oh, well, I do. Well, I have one thing to say is that I'm posting a link to the Optum career jobs right now. So this is one recommendation, and I'm posting it at the bottom of your screen. So I'm displaying that now. So if you could just take a look at that. But anything else, Janet, that you'd like to add?
The only thing I can think, the first thing I think of is kind of what I said before. It can be difficult to get directly into cybersecurity without some sort of related IT experience. The fact that you're a researcher really qualifies you for this field, because I find that my team does security assessments of technologies, and we find that it's always something new. We're always having to do research, and IT, cybersecurity, those fields are constantly evolving. So the ability to do research and understand new things coming along is key to being successful and satisfied in that field. I think I would say look for if you can find some sort of entry level IT job that will get you exposed to the kinds of issues that we deal with in IT, give you a chance to see kind of what goes on in an IT shop, and get a sense of where. I think if you are working even in an entry level, you can kind of get a sense of where something might be vulnerable or where something might be able to be attacked, and start trying to identify those things and look for ways that those things could be remediated, and lean on your more experienced coworkers. If you see something that looks questionable, ask them about it. Get them to explain whether it is or it isn't a security issue. Have them explain it to you either way, so that you can build your own knowledge base that way. That's the best thing I can think of.
Great. Very good. Thank you, Janet. Speaking of issues, so what are some of the issues that you deal with on a daily basis in a job such as yours? So this is like, oh gosh. This is a fun one, Janet.
My job was the last thing I was prepared to talk about here. In what my team does is analyzing software and hardware for security issues. So a lot of what we have to know is about application security. I was mentioning, development. We would be the people on the other end of that development cycle where our company is buying software. So we're, constantly looking at what other companies' secure development processes are, what their technology stack is that they're using, how they handle things like authentication that I mentioned, being an issue. What kind of all of these things that I mentioned as the CISSP domains, we look at how they're testing. Are they doing testing of the software? Are they making sure that vulnerabilities are remediated before they're sending the software out? So a lot of what my team looks at is related to application security. And it's, like I said, with the field, every assessment that we get in is slightly different. You're constantly having to research new technologies. You may hear a term that you haven't heard before, so you have to go out and research it, figure out what it means, and then how it interacts with with the rest of the software that you're looking at. And understanding, the other thing we have to understand is how, whether it's hardware or software we're looking at, how that interacts with all of the other systems on the network, how it interacts with third parties outside the network. So we spend a lot of time looking at things like architecture diagrams and doing a lot of research into application security.
Thank you, Janet. So we have one final question that we're going to wrap it up with. And I don't know if you can answer this or not, but it would just be, I'm just going to ask it because the audience member is asking it. So it's up to you, to Janet. What kind of legal issues can a security professional consider? This is a really good question, because what this particular individual is asking is, for example, if the system that is responsible for securing is compromised and data is leaked, could that professional, could this individual that's asking the question, could they face legal problems with that?
That's a great question.
Might be a legal question. I
can say that I have only recently heard of one class action suit where a company, and I can't remember who it was off the top of my head, a company was sued over a data breach because they didn't provide adequate security initially. So if you're working for a company, most likely it's the corporate entity that's going to be responsible, not you as the individual. If you're an individual providing security services and there's a breach, you could be held accountable. That's probably, I've had some experience looking at our legal agreements with third parties. Might be something, if you were going to strike out on your own and do this, might be something you would want to cover in your contract with that company. The other thing I've heard about, well, you're not asking about penetration testing, so I won't go off into that, but it hasn't been an issue in the past, but it may become more of an issue in the future.
Got it. Well, that is a wrap, Janet. We're at the hour, and this has been a lovely webinar. I learned a lot. I know our audience certainly appreciates your time and attention and all the great information you shared. And so I want to thank the audience for sharing your afternoon with us. And Janet, it's always a pleasure working with you. I just really appreciate you and the good work you're doing. So
thank you, and we appreciate you.
Thank you. Have a great day, everyone. We'll sync up again soon.
Bye.
Bye.